How clearly and confidently could my family articulate my wishes in case of an emergency or unexpected passing? So I suffered a spontaneous retinal detachment. My vision faded to black in my right side. My career as a pharmacist would get cut short. So now I've been given this gift, this blessing, to look at something from a whole new perspective. I'm not in a family business, but I created my own wealth. I say I'm a wealth builder. So that's how I started thinking we need to expand the conversation beyond generational wealth. I want my kids to have it better than I had it. What they needed is generational wisdom, because wealth without wisdom is wasted.
Strengthen the love, the legacy, and the lifestyle in your family business. This is Fearless Family Business. Your kids may be fully provided for right now, but are they prepared to be financially sustainable in the future? Welcome to the Fearless Family Business Show. I'm Adam Hill, and in today's episode, I interview Julia Myers, an international speaker and founder of Generational Wisdom, who shares the moment that changed everything for her and showed her that wealth alone was not enough. And after a sudden medical emergency forced her out of her successful career, she asked a powerful question: is my family truly prepared or just provided for? This conversation will completely change the way you think about legacy. It's not just about passing on wealth. It's about passing on wisdom. Wisdom that Julia shares with the audience today. So please stick around. And if you're leading a family business and you want more insights like this, please be sure to subscribe to the channel for more conversations that help you to strengthen love, legacy, and lifestyle in your family business. Enjoy the show. Julia Myers, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really, really excited to have you on.
Oh, Adam, thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here as well.
Yeah, this is a really, really important conversation to have regarding how we prepare our next generation, how we deal with things like entitlement, and how we help them to be prepared with their financials, and especially maybe inheriting wealth. And so you are an expert on that. And I think this is going to be a good conversation, really helpful for the audience. And I'd love to hear your story. How did you get into this world? I know you come from a background in healthcare. How did you get into that world? Just tell us a little bit about your origin story.
Well, growing up, I say that I'm a cusper. So I'm half Gen X, half millennial. I kind of get to pick and choose with which side I identify. And that meant that I grew up checking boxes. You save a lot, you go to college, you get a degree, and then you work till you're 65 and you retire and you live happily ever after. So my first memories of money were literally counting coins and stacking them and then putting them into sleeves and taking them to the bank. Like that's what I thought saving money was. And then very quickly I realized, okay, what's the fastest path to cash? And it was going to pharmacy school. I could make six figures and get a doctorate degree without all the years of medical school. So Walgreens was my first job at 16 and stayed with them for quite a while. Now they're no longer a company, so I'm kind of glad I exited. But origin story was I always wanted to help people. I always wanted to be the solution or the shining light, because nobody goes to a pharmacy because they want to, right? They're sick, right. Somebody they know is sick, or you have their pills and they don't get them. So I say that I want to be the light as it brings, just perspective. What I didn't know is that my career as a pharmacist would get cut short. And so I suffered a spontaneous retinal detachment at the hospital, where it's an academic medical center where I was the director of pharmacy, and my vision faded to black in my right side. And I've done enough warnings and enough precautions to say, if you experience blurriness or sudden changes in your vision, call your doctor right away. Well, that was my buddy on the P&T committee. And I said, hey, I'm doing this. He's like, come on up, let me check you out. 2 hours later, I was signing surgery consent forms to get in for an emergency surgery. Detached retina is important, but it's usually not career ending, not life ending. Yeah. But when I signed a form that said, which is fine print, and I say that I'm the expert in the fine print, but I couldn't really see it, but I saw this part. No pun intended there.
You should always intend your puns. By the way.
It was asking me how clearly and confidently could my family articulate my wishes in case of an emergency or unexpected passing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, wait a minute. How clearly and confidently? Like, I checked my boxes. I have the trust. I have all the legal things. But I am not confident that they would know what to do if something happened to me today. I didn't know if it was a blessing or a burden. And then, like, as I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh my goodness, like, this is supposed to be this outpatient procedure, not a big deal. And it hit me that, is my family prepared or are they just provided for?
Mm-hmm.
And they were provided for. And I kind of made it in that moment, not knowing my career was going to be over for lots of different reasons, but I wasn't able to practice pharmacy again. When I woke up, my eye was stuck in a down position, which is not supposed to happen, right? When you have eye surgery, you're supposed to have both eyes work together. 5 surgeries later, Johns Hopkins couldn't fix it, best surgeons in the world. It came back to me that I was like, okay, I remember being hit with that feeling of, what am I going to do differently because of this experience? And now I've been given this gift, this blessing, to look at something from a whole new perspective. And it was like, okay, what are I going to do with the legacy that I've built? I'm not in a family business, but I created my own wealth. I say I'm a wealth builder. And what am I going to do? So that's how I started thinking we need to expand the conversation beyond generational wealth. That's the box I grew up wanting to check. I want to leave generational wealth. I want my kids to have it better than I had it. What they needed is wisdom, generational wisdom. And that's what I am all about, to make that the household term that we pass on, because wealth without wisdom is wasted.
That's amazing. I love that philosophy. There's just not a lot of that talk about preparation and next generation. And I think, like your story represents, we tend maybe not to realize that until something hits us over the head, that
you didn't
that we
see
need
it coming.
to change. Yeah. Right. Very true. Yeah. And I mean, one thing that caught my attention there is that you called that, that spontaneous retinal detachment that ended your career, something that most people, I think, would look at and say, this is the end of what I was doing. Like it would be a traumatic experience for them. And I don't minimize that it may have been for you as well, but the fact that you called it a blessing and that abundance mindset that kind of comes from that, you were looking at yourself as a wealth generator or a wealth builder, and that you could pass that knowledge on. Was that at that moment kind of when you had that realization or when you learned that you couldn't practice, pharmacy anymore? Was that your feeling at the time? Was there a period of grief, or what went through your head at that time?
I absolutely spent about 6 months figuring out who I was, because my identity was what I did. My identity was Dr. Myers. My identity was, I'm a national, board member on this committee and that committee. And I'm, 20 under 40 because of my weight coat. And it really made me think through what matters and then what lasts. Because what matters right now is like one part of it, right? What I think I'm building, what I think I'm climbing towards. But what actually lasts was this big disconnection way down the line. And when you're not able to do those things, makes you reflect and say, not just what do I do, but who am I? Who is Julia?
Yeah.
And what do I want to be known for? And so absolutely, there was this shift in identity of what am I going to do now? The joke is nobody wants a one-eyed pharmacist counting their medication. I don't have any depth perception, and so I can't run major P&Ls or boardrooms like I used to, because you kind of need to see with your eyes. And so I just literally relearned how to do a lot of things. And it was the night that I was tucking in my daughter, and we were sitting there reading a storybook. We'd done the bath routine or whatever, and she was like, okay, let's read. And I couldn't read the font. I couldn't make out the words because under the low light, and I'm like squinting, and I just looked at her and she's like, let me try. And in that moment, the roles were reversed. And that was the moment that it really hit me. A, she learned to read at 3.5 because that's the age she was and she wanted to still do bedtime routine. But B, it was like, someday this will be, the roles are going to be reversed. Someday she might be reading to me in a much more incapacitated way. That's when it made me realize what really mattered and where I wanted to be putting my focus.
Yeah, that's such a powerful story. And I think a lot of family businesses in particular, especially those that are in roles of leadership, can relate to the idea that the identity is tied to the role in the business. With a far less, with a far less, I guess, a similar story, but not tied to obviously the medical challenges. I just left my role as the CEO of our family business, of something where my identity felt a little tied to that. And I think that happens a lot. And you go through this period of transition. Is that something you try to pass on in the education that you're giving to the next generation, or to younger people, or to families who may be navigating that, on how they should look at their identity as it compares to what they do or what their vocation is?
Oh, great question. And I think there is an art and a science to that answer. So I think the science comes from a solid financial foundation. Mm-hmm. I would not have seen this as a blessing if I didn't have everything taken care of financially. If we weren't debt-free except for the mortgage, if we didn't have certain policies in place, if we didn't have all those documents, I would not have been blessed. I would have been freaking out. And so that is the important part, is you have to do that work. Mm-hmm. And then the other part is, how do you think about it? How do you spend your time, your attention, and your finances? How are you building, and what are you building? And can everybody really describe what it is you're building? So as the leader of your family or the leader of your organization, or it happens to be both, can everybody really articulate and be on the same page? Or is it in the name of success that's defined by somebody else? So I like to say you'll always feel pressure, but it's going to feel like positive pressure is going to feel like those positive influences. It's going to feel like purpose. I want to build, I want to grow, I want to do this. But the negative ones are really what are going to pull you down.
Yeah. What are some of those?
Yeah, that many. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of those emotions that you feel? I mean, on the positive side and the negative side, I know that we have, things like a feeling of obligation, perhaps when we have generational wealth that might be transferred down, or entitlement, or even like an excitement of sorts. What are some of the emotions that surround that, and how can we look at them differently?
I think when you are in the grind of the climb of the corporate world, I survived the COVID pandemic in a leadership role. I didn't lose a single team member to turnover or anything. Like, that was everything. And then when you are in that grind, it's hard to feel anything. And emotions are felt. You don't like think through or like time block your day for this is this emotion, this is that emotion. Right. And it was really in this stillness, almost a literal forced stillness, because when you're recovering, your eyes are closed or you have one eye open and then it gets really tired. I found that it was physically slowing me down to then sit and kind of process through, what was I feeling? I didn't like how I felt. I didn't like sitting with it. I'm a go-getter. I'm not a sitter. And that was a hard lesson for me to have to learn, that maybe ahead in your journey, you've got reflection before, and then you rip the Band-Aid. And there's something like in that dopamine rush of you rip the Band-Aid, I quit the job, or I changed this. But isn't that entrepreneurship, right? Isn't that uninformed optimism where you're like, let's go. And then you're like, this is my life now.
Yeah.
Now what?
It's right.
And
is that one day where your head's in the clouds and you're super excited, and another moment you're in the fetal position in the corner in your office, wondering why you've ever done it. I've been there. Yeah.
Yes. And remembering that I didn't intentionally tell myself my kids are watching. yet it was always there. They saw the recovery. They saw all of the appointments, and they saw, the day that I kind of handed my keys over and we went to a 1-car household. Those weren't moments that were taken lightly, but I also didn't avoid them. And so that conversation about money is often avoided. That conversation about legacy is just inferred or expected. And yet the conversation around challenges, like parents can't have challenges. We can't have it hard. We've got it all figured out. And I have to remind myself that my chapter 20 is teaching them something, but it's not how to do their chapter 1. And so making it applicable to the kids at all their ages is so, so important, that they learn through your struggles, even if they don't have to do it themselves.
Yeah. I'd love to hear more about that as far as your chapter 20, where you're at, and then meeting basically your kids where they're at their chapter 1. I really love that visual. How do you, what skills or tips do you have that you can help people to really take themselves back to chapter 1, so to speak, or help their kid, help to see things from their kids' eyes so that they can better teach them and better equip them with the right set of tools?
It's one of the 7 things that I teach is embracing privilege and just calling it what it is. That I grew up, was the first one to get an advanced degree. I paid for my own college, paid for my own car, and most likely the kids aren't going to be faced with those sorts of hard. They're going to have different hard. Their Joneses are no longer the people next door or the cars in the school parking lot. Their Joneses are in their pocket and all over the world. And so the different types of hard that especially like our young adults and our teens are facing is so very different. And I like to explain it as you realize you have a head start. That doesn't mean you don't have a race to run.
Yeah.
You still have a race. Your head start is by no fault of your own, no earning of your own. Now don't squander it. And let's go. That means that this journey that is ahead of you, you've got to find your purpose. You've got to find your calling. And as a friendly reality check, your income has to match your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
Period. And
Right.
if one is out of balance with the other, your chapter 1, my chapter 20, it's going to be unsustainable, either your lifestyle or your income. And so no matter what your head start is, there will always be somebody ahead of you, and accepting that too, because then all of a sudden they're going to college and they're surrounded by people that they've never been around, or now they're the one that maybe has more intangible assets than the others around them. And so they're feeling this shame. They're feeling this kind of weird privileged spot. And I like to say, you get to decide how you feel. Mm-hmm. You were born into this country. You don't say, I wish I wasn't born here. No, you say, okay, I'm born here, and how do I move forward to find my purpose and my calling?
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to hear more about how you adopted the money habits early on that got you to the point where you needed it, you found yourself debt free, and you found yourself in that moment of abundance where you could, semi support yourself, in the next phase. What were the habits and how did you adopt those habits, and what led to that for you early on?
Oh, great question. I remember always being told to save, not invest, not diversify or leverage, but just save. And so savings has always been like a part of it. And then giving has always been a part for as long as I can remember, even as a kiddo. And when I was in college, I was the one taking out just enough student loans to pay for tuition. And then I was working the rest, and almost like an aversion to debt. And then when I started making 6 figures as a pharmacist, I was 21. I'm like, this is amazing. I leased a car. And that was the worst financial decision ever. It was a 2008 Volkswagen EOS. Remember those? The little convertibles that came out, and then it wasn't worth anything a year later when I was like, that was a dumb decision. And so I always found a way to live within my means. I always gave and I always saved first. And then I just lived on whatever was the rest. And that kind of followed me always. And so having that then be a value that I'm passing down to my kids is one of those pieces of my influences from growing up that I want to keep.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. That's such a, I mean, and not a lot of people have that insight. They just go out and lease the car, and then on top of that, go into debt. I know my biggest financial mistake happened early on too. I was a college student, and I love the phrase you used. You said cusper for the person that
Yeah,
kind of
Jason
straddles the
Dorsey
line.
coined it. I can't take credit,
Oh,
but it's an
okay.
amazing book as it relates to workforce and Gen Z. So we
Yeah.
can drop the link in the show notes, but it's called Z Economy by Jason Dorsey, and he calls
Okay.
us cuspers,
Cusper. So that the people that balance between X and
millennials.
yeah, millennials. Okay. I'm right there as well. So I had the great fortune, as you probably did, of not having to go to school with cell phones and all of that kind of stuff. And those came out much later. And but what we did have when we went to college, and I wonder if you saw this too, was in the quad or wherever, they always had these tents that would pop up with credit card companies peddling free shirts to sign up for a credit card. And I really wanted a free shirt. And of course, that put me thousands of dollars in debt. It was the most expensive, dumb t-shirt that I've ever bought. So it was, so yeah, so those early financial mistakes can be learning experiences, but a lot of people don't learn from them. If you're a family business owner or operator and you're looking to get more control over your business, I would love to talk with you. I want to give you a special invite to request a free 90-minute workshop with me to learn the powerful tools of EOS, the Entrepreneurial Operating System. Just shoot me an email at adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. Again, that email is adam.hill@eosworldwide.com. I'll put that in the show notes as well, and I look forward to talking to you soon. So what do you think is the difference there as far as mindset is concerned, for people that maybe adopt the right practices and don't?
I think it's the story we tell ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's, I didn't learn it, so therefore I can't do it, or
Yeah.
I'm just bad at it, or I don't do math. Well, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, you're an adult. You have to. And today is the day that you start. You can't unhear that we're going to talk about where to start and the basics. And starting today, you get to decide, how do you want to have your money story play out going forward? So the crazy statistic is that about 70% of wealth is lost in the second generation. So in one generation transfer. So 70% is gone. And when I really dug into it, I'm like, why is that? And it comes down to really three things. One being no skills. Two, no ownership. And three, no expectations. So if we fill that cup from the other way and not just talk about what you don't have, well, what do you have? What are those that are successful? Because none of us want to be the 70%. We just think we're the 30% of, we've got this figured out. What are those skills? What's that financial literacy specifically related to risk? Specifically related to what are safe money decisions that you can make and fail at? And what are those that you cannot recover from? I bought a house in Phoenix, Arizona in 2007. And I remember outbidding the pharmacist down the street from me to be like, I want that corner lot. You get the corner lot. And then we short sold it 2 years later.
Yeah.
So what are those things you can recover from? And then what are those things that are completely detrimental? What can you self-insure against versus not? And when you have a family and you've got teen drivers, you've got teens doing what teens do, how are you protected in the case that something goes not just bad, but bad, is what we say in our house.
Bad.
The kids are like, I did a bad. And I'm like, okay, let's talk. So I think the no skills part, but specifically diving in, especially for this audience, is the risk. Most money lost in cryptocurrency was actually by the Gen Z generation, wanting to get rich quick, wanting to play the game, and they lost. And they didn't have the money to lose. So we've got to start with the skills. Next up is the ownership, realizing that it's your money, but it's not really your money, right? Like You want to pass it on to somebody else. You are the vessel with which it goes through. If you're a believer, you're going to think about the stewardship that you've been given and that it's for you to do great things with. It's not for you to spend it all. And at the end of the day, you can't find true happiness in spending whatever it is anyway. So you've got to have that ownership. And the third and final one would be, what are those expectations? So what are those things that, for heaven forbid, you won't get any money, period? Have you had those conversations? You know, if it's a DUI, if it's a felony charge, if it's a dumb decision on a Friday night, those are going to happen. But if you have had those conversations ahead of time of like, this is black and white, out of bounds, it's for you as the parent to decide that. It's also your responsibility to communicate it. And what are the expectations? And the kids are expecting a free ride in life. We have failed them as parents,
right?
You know, and how do we give without entitling? And I think it starts with us as parents. And I'll share that what we have chosen to do is half of everything we have will go to charity. And then the rest will go to the kids. And then the kids, half of what they get, so they're fifth, because there's 5 of them, half of what they get to give away. They don't get to keep it. And that is, for better or for worse, how we have chosen to do it. But I don't hear many families talking about, okay, I'm going to give it to where I want it to go. But how often do our kids like different ice cream flavors, different sports activities? Like, of course, they're going to want to give differently. Let them feel empowered to do that. And when they have that expectation, they're like, I know it's not mine already. And they can already start thinking about where they want to give it.
So by my math, that's 75% of your total wealth going to a charity of some kind. Is that right?
Yep.
Good. I'm glad I passed that test because that would have been embarrassing. But
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And you know, it ebbs and it flows, but it's an expectation that they know that we're blessed. They know that the 5-year-old at the dinner table one night, you know, we're eating chicken nuggets or chicken, like something just very basic, noisy, boisterous, big family table. And she's like, are we rich? And I'm like, husband, silence. What do you think that means, honey? Is what I had to ask. Because all the parents, you never answer the question. You ask them what they think it means. She's like, I think it's the freedom to do whatever I want, whenever I want to. Kind of like what we do. And I just was like, wow. And then the 18-year-old jumped in and said, no, that's wrong. That's wealthy. That's not rich. And we're both, and you should be happy. And it was just this full circle moment of what is rich versus what is wealthy? What do we want? And what does it really mean? And then when they know that, we've had this conversation at the dinner table with everybody around. Who do we talk to about it? Where are the safe places that we can have these conversations? But then also, what do we do? Because it's going to come to you, but it's not all coming to you. Right. I love you, not that much.
Yeah.
I want to bless you, not burden you.
100%. And I want to touch on that because I think that's an important point too, is you see a lot of times with generational wealth that you want to pass on the wealth to be a blessing to the kids, but it does become a burden. I think more times than we'd care to admit. I mean, you mentioned the statistics of 70% of wealth gets lost in the second generation, and that statistic is really interesting to me because it's very similar to the number of family businesses that are effectively passed on to the second generation. And I think that there's a good correlation there, that both of those, represent the reason that they can't: skills, ownership, expectations. That's a real powerful framework for how we could, start the conversation around how to prepare the next generation with those skills, ownership, expectations. So I'm curious as to that burden versus the blessing kind of conversation. Where does that line of happiness and money intersect? If we're stewards for that money, for the wealth, And yet we want to use wealth to have a life of freedom. Where is that intersection between happiness and wealth?
Oh, great question. And I'm going to give you another framework.
Sure.
Because what I've found, the missing piece that solves for this disconnection of what we think we're building and like what actually lasts or lack thereof comes down to discernment. And that's a word we don't say often. It's definitely not an action that we practice. And if we can practice that muscle of discernment, we can then answer that question for ourselves. And it is very much a spectrum. I like to think of it as a quadrant. I call it the discernment quadrant, where you have two axes. One is going to be your consuming, and one is your creating. And so you're using money to do one of those two things. You're consuming something or you're creating something. And very easily, that's like the numerical value, right? That we can quantify. That's what the price is. And then the cost is often this way, where we're talking about scarcity and abundance. And as long as we're staying in this upper half here, where we can consume out of an abundance mindset, and to me, that's travel. That's one of our core values as a family. Those are the memories that we make, the excursions that we take. And then when we move over to creating out of abundance, that's when you can do your investing, your real estate, your business ownership, your, venture capitalist activities. Those are all done out of an abundant mindset, compared to at the bottom of those quadrants, you've got those people that are creating money, and they're the old cartoon Scrooge McDuck, and they're swimming in their money and they don't want to get rid of it. They are not happy, but they are wealthy. And the key is they are coming from a place of scarcity and not abundance. And then the very bottom left is when you're consuming out of a scarcity mindset, that's the Joneses. That's the, I've got to buy the latest thing, or I need to purchase this or that. It's consuming things that never just make you happy. So I never thought about it as wealth versus happy. I always thought about it as you get both. And if you're not, it's probably not wealth that you're happy with. It's probably rich. And it's just a monetary numerical value that a society has said, this comma makes you worth this much.
Yeah. Yeah. That's such a great framework. I just drew it out as you were speaking it.
I can drop a link, but yeah, it's really a fun way to think about it. And then you can run your decisions through that, because you don't just learn discernment. You don't just learn money management. You don't just learn business operations. You intern and you practice and you get it wrong and you get it right. So the next time any one of you has a big decision or even a little one, run it through that matrix and say, am I making this spend choice out of scarcity or abundance? Am I intentionally choosing to consume, or am I choosing to create?
Yeah.
And where do you want to land?
That's a great
There's
tool.
not a right or a wrong. It's just, it is what it is.
That's such a great tool. I really, really love that, because there's so much financial creep out there, that like expense creep in some ways, that like it's so easy to buy and consume. It's so easy to go to the Amazon and click on things that we buy. And I've seen our Amazon bill, and it's just like, but it is, I think that to that extent, if we were running all of our purchase decisions through that would be so helpful to actually drive that alignment between, where our wealth is, what makes us happy, so that we can keep more of what we earn and live within our means and still enjoy it. I know that was always that. So that was something that I was following my curiosity on, because I know, at least as a young adult, I was always struggling with that idea of, I know I need to save, but I also, want things. And how do I balance that out? And I'm sure a lot of young people have those ideas too.
Oh, that's a quote my kids hear me say more than enough is, you can buy anything. You can't buy everything. How do you know what to buy?
So what are these conversations? How do these conversations start with kids? Like how do we start with our own kids if we haven't had those conversations yet? What are the first kinds of questions we should ask, and how do we approach them?
Oh, great question. And I give you permission to have never had these conversations before, because growing up, this cusper generation, you don't talk about money.
We figured it out all on our own.
Talk about some of the things that need to be talked about.
Yeah.
But I also caution that we don't want to run the pendulum the other way, because we've all met those people that all they do is talk about the market, talk about the housing returns, and that's all they do is they talk about the numbers. So give yourself some grace that if you've avoided this conversation, you can kind of lean in, and I will give you a pass. The very first 2, 3, 4 conversations, please don't say a single number or equation. I give you permission. And I think if you are starting at the very beginning, no matter how old your kids are, everybody loves a good story. Start with your stories about money from your childhood. Well, I don't have a story. We didn't have any money. Okay, well, say, what happened when you got a bill? What did it feel like when the phone rang? And for some people, that brings up a lot of things. And for other people, it's like, I did always ask my dad for money. I never asked my mom for money. Well, it wasn't until 1972 that women could have their own bank account without a spouse or have a mortgage. So that's not that long ago.
Yeah, it's just crazy to think about that. That's not long ago.
And so if your excuse for not having these conversations was, I never learned about it growing up, well, too bad. Because even if you did learn it, it would have changed. And now you can open a bank account without ever even leaving your home. And physical banks are mansions, and they keep coins in these mansions and artifacts, which is fantastic. And so when we're talking about those money conversations, start with your own story. What's your first memory of money? What was that time that you touched a $100 bill for the first time? Or maybe you've never touched a $100 bill and you've only Venmoed it and you don't even know what it looks like. Those are great places to start. And then asking the kids, what would you do if you had $100? Or pick an amount that feels big relative to their age. Because my teenagers will be like, I'll buy one Jordan instead of 2 for a set, So yeah. Pick a number that feels relatively large to them. And for me growing up, it was $100. It was that bill that I was just, someday I want to hold one. I want to touch one. Talk about those stories with the kids and figure out what are those emotions that come up. And then maybe what are those traditions? I like to say your history, what you grew up with is your belief backpack. You as an adult get to choose what you put in your backpack and bring to work with you every day. So what are those maybe traditions you loved? Was it getting a $2 bill at Easter? We'd always try and find the Easter egg that had the $2 bill in it, and we still do that today with our kids. And then maybe what are those traditions you want to leave behind that is, we feel scarce in this area, or we don't do this, or we don't do that because we can't afford it. Okay, let's let those beliefs go. But when we tell it through a lens of a story, the defensive walls go down, especially when we talk about this with our partner, whether it's your spouse, your life partner, your business partners. Getting them to open up about their story, you don't get to judge because it's their story. Now, when you start making decisions together, now all bets are off. Y'all all get to make decisions together. But when you come from that place of understanding, you normalize a conversation around something as basic as the weather, as basic as what's for dinner. And it's not this thing to be avoided, swept under the rug, or obsessed over.
Yeah. How and those conversations you've obviously had with your 5 kids already. You've started to have those conversations. You've got one child, I understand, that's into adulthood at least. More that are getting there. How have those conversations shaped where they're at today with regard to their relationship with money?
I am a proud parent of 2 off of payroll. How many of you out there can say they are off of payroll at or around the age of 18?
Wow.
So,
yeah.
For me, I would say all of these conversations have built them and led them to launching. They always knew that was the goal, was to launch and be not financial independence, but financially independent, to where they were in charge of their own money. They were in charge of the decisions they made. And yes, we're a phone call away when stuff hits the fan or whatever, but that's very different than the expectation of everything's covered, everything's taken care of. And so just recently, my 18-year-old, he's a freshman in college, came over, he booked a ticket for a concert in another city. And he's like, okay, I'm booking these flights and I'm booking this transportation. Can we just walk through this together? And we did. And he pulled out his debit card because I say cash before plastic, debit before credit, credit before loans. That's kind of the shortcut sneak peek. And I said, wait a minute, let me look at my Southwest points. Oh, I've got enough points to cover it. And his face lit up. He was like, I'm so blessed. He was prepared to buy the flight. And I felt so good blessing him with giving it. And those are the moments that I think all parents want. And you're proud of their independence for finding it, trying to find the best deal. The money spends differently when it's theirs. We all know this, right?
Right.
So my favorite tip, if you've got kids in elementary and middle school, is let the kids earn the money to buy the birthday presents. Parents, you are officially relieved of buying a birthday present ever again. You might physically be there to get them to the store or the Amazon, but imagine how that feels when your kiddo gives that gift that they've bought with their own money. That's one of my favorite things, is teaching them that ownership at an earlier age and their responsibility.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about how that would work. So when you say earning the money, you mean through chores, through working around the house, or to earn the money to buy their own presents for their birthdays?
Yeah,
is that right?
yes, and.
Yeah.
So 80% of the jobs today are not physical labor jobs. They're cognitive. So I try to balance that at home the same way. So 20% might be the traditional mowing the lawn, babysitting, above and beyond living in the house. Because every year when they have their birthday, we celebrate their birthday and they get a new responsibility. So by the time they're 12, they're doing their own laundry, but they're not getting paid to do that. That's just like part of being in the family. And so that's how they'll earn some of the money. And then the other is cognitive. How are we creating value? How are we solving problems? So whether it's, I will pay them to do customer service calls. Yes, we use phones for actual phones. And no, I don't just throw them in the very first time, but they'll hear me and vice versa. And I am so proud to say that my kids will kind of step into a conversation and be like, here, let me help, let me handle this, or let me something. And that independence is not something they just are born with. They have to learn it. Learning is a huge value in our family. And so we pay for reading books, and not just reading, but having a conversation with us. And then they get to kind of be like, what's the value you gained from that? Is that a $5 book or is that a $20 book? And if your kid is 5 or older, they can read Who Moved My Cheese. And that's the first book we pay our kids to read. So they get $5 for Who Moved My Cheese. And then they get some really fun old words that they act like, what does that mean? What does that mean? A newer one to how they earn money is TED Talks. So they will find a topic that they're interested in or a person, and they'll pick it and they'll watch it, or we'll watch it all together. And I want to teach them how to solve problems, not just Google the answer, but like, how can we solve this problem? And that in turn equals revenue. And then often we bonus for great attitude, great performance, and going above and beyond. Because what do we do in the real world? We bonus. We have a great attitude, great performance. So I want to align how I'm compensating them younger so that they know those ways to win at life when they're older.
I love that. That's so great. It's changing the way that we're paying our kids through allowance versus, how we've done it in physical labor, but it's aligning it more with how the workforce will be paid in the future. I love that. I love that perspective. That's really great.
I think Scott Donnell says, allowance is socialism. He's like, you just expect the same thing all the time for doing nothing. I'm like, that's a good quote.
Yeah, that makes a big difference. And I'm curious, speaking of things like that, we're in a point in time where, the economy is shifting. There's a lot of fear out there naturally about finances and where the economy is going. How does that play into the conversations that we should be having with our kids and how we talk to them about it?
That is a great example, because my 14-year-old just went off to camp. He gets to see the Noah's Ark in Kentucky for 3 days. And we were talking about, hey, we're going to need some cash. And we went in and grabbed some cash, which also is in a brokerage account. And we were talking about where did the money go is what he asked me. He's like, where'd the money go? I'm like, well, remember we talked about risk, and we talked about when you are gaining, there's a risk of losing. And when you're more conservative, and we start using these bigger words that are financial terms, but basically, if you don't want to earn as much, you don't risk losing as much. And that's why we have broken it out in this particular way. And he's like, oh, okay. So I'm like, that's why this percent of it is always in kind of safe or cash. And then this is why this part is invested. And then this is why this part over here in your 529 and your Roth IRA, those are amounts. I don't care what that number says. I just know it's going to grow by the time you need it.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, okay, got it. So.
Right. So it just goes back to education is key.
Yeah, it goes back to education in those little life moments that when you're having those, what do all kids want, right? They want to be treated like big kids. And then the big kids want to be treated like adults. That doesn't mean we shelter them from the realities of volatility or, inflation, those particular big words. It also doesn't mean you have to be the financial expert. And it's okay for you to show vulnerability, for you to show, I don't know a lot about what's going on. Let's learn together.
Mm-hmm.
Like those are great things to do.
Yeah. Do you think that adds to their knowledge when you are being vulnerable like that and just demonstrating, I don't know, I don't have all the answers. Do you think that helps them to know that they, I guess, be more engaging with them rather than them having to think that you do have all the answers? I don't know if that question makes sense, but.
Absolutely. Going back to all the medical things, they were used to seeing me have a medicine to literally fix everything. We have medicines to treat hiccups, and there's no medicine to fix this. But then there's a surgeon, right? And trust a surgeon. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But what do you do when it doesn't fix it and you don't have that control? It's changing where you focus. It's being able to see it differently. Like you can focus on what was lost, or you can focus on, okay, what remains and what's this new perspective? And so when we're vulnerable and we don't know, that's the best way we can teach our kids that we're always learning. Because there's not this someday you check the box that they're 18 and they know everything. They definitely do not. They think they do. I thought I did at 18.
Sure.
And so when you have that openness and that conversation, that then serves you now that they're older, and we're having open, healthy conversations around, what do you think I should do? Or which career track or which law school? My daughter had a spreadsheet analyzing not just the physical costs of which law school she wanted to go to, but also what is her happiness index? We walked through that. What's the weather like? What's the transportation like? What's making those decisions? And then for you as a parent, you're able to see they're making them on their own because you taught them through your own adversity, your own uncertainty.
Right. That's so great. That's so good. I want to touch on something that you're working on now, which is really exciting. And as far as kind of engaging with the family, that family constitution that you're putting together. Can you talk a little bit about what you're doing there, what you're building out there?
Absolutely. So when I work with families and I'm like, what are you doing to pass on wealth? Most of the time they'll say, I have a trust. I'm like, great, you need a trust. And then I say, a trust controls the money. A constitution controls the meaning. And without the meaning, it's just money, and it's going to be a statistic, and it's going to be lost. $84 trillion with a T is going to change hands in the next 20 years. 26% of parents feel confident their kids can handle it. The money's coming, it's scary. So what are we going to do about it? A trust is part of it, but we need the Constitution. So when we think about legacy, I really like to think about, I've done U.S. history 5 times now. So U.S. history, the founding fathers, they created this bigger vision, but it wasn't so prescriptive that it couldn't change. And so at work, we have mission, vision, values. As a country, we have a constitution. I'm like, we need a family constitution. We need, the preamble is like, what's the intent? And so we're going to talk about the principles. And then the, articles are like the body of it. Like, how do you operate? Like, what's in bounds? What's out of bounds? So I like to say that's our practices. And then the last part is the amendments of the US Constitution. Like, how are we going to preserve this? Because life changes, kids grow up, things happen that you absolutely need to make it not a historic practice like counting coins. Thank goodness there's machines for that. But at the same time, what is that visual reminder? Many years ago, people would have coat of arms, right? And all the things they stood for. And that's kind of gone by the wayside. And I've shared this with a few families, and I have the 3 Ps. So you're getting really clear on the values, really clear on what you say yes to and what you say no to. How do you do that as a family? Because individually, I've got my own goals. My husband does, and each kind of kiddo does. But together, like, what do we really want to be remembered for and known for? And then how are we changing it? How are we looking at it? And so for the last couple of years, we have actually done at the end of the year a highlight reel, because kids and their technology, you can't separate them, but you can embrace them. Pick their favorite pictures of the year that represent our family constitution. And they give us a little slideshow or play or some sort of a story. And then the way that each kid sees that value from a different angle is just incredible and very entertaining.
Yeah.
And they look forward to it. So, and then we do superlatives of like, who lived this out the best, who lived this out the worst, and all the things. But when you're intentional as a family and you have a constitution, and you can not just say we're all the things, but what are the 3 things? Can your family, and Adam, I won't put you on the spot, but if you're listening, what are those 3 things that your family stands for? And can everybody articulate it? And if you grab any of my kiddos, they will say love, learning, and experiences. So those are our 3. And we had to get rid of a bunch of really good ideas to say, okay, those things. And every quarter we check in, like, how aligned was our spending? How aligned was our time with those 3 things? And what do we want to fix? What do we not? So that, in a nutshell, is a family constitution. It's unique to each family. It evolves over time. And yet, at the same time, it can hang on the wall and it can be beautiful, and is that thing that you kind of pass by subtly, like those cute pictures when your kids were little and you're like, I remember that. You could put it on the wall too. We do.
I love that. That's so good. And I think it's so important. It goes along with, just like running any good business, running a family has to be similar. There has to be a rules of engagement. And in the US, we have a vision traction organizer where we set the values for the business and things like that. And if you're in a family business, it's so important too to have a family charter or constitution. And within the individual family household, now you're talking about bringing that to the family as well, which is hugely valuable. And the way that I've always looked at legacy in terms of building out a long legacy, it's not just this restrictive thing that forces a family to live by exactly the founder vision as it was. As you said, it should be an evolving thing. Just as it shouldn't be absolute freedom to be whatever, there has to be some defined guidelines. But I think that legacy exists in that balance between the freedom for the future generations to go where their passions drive them, and instills the traditions and the rituals and everything that the previous generations wanted to bring that made that family great. And you're kind of tying that together in that family constitution, which is beautiful.
Yeah, it's a fun experience, and it gets you really thinking of, absolutely, we've done this at work, or absolutely, we've done this individually. And we started the conversation talking about generational wealth. And what's the purpose of generational wealth? We want to leave it to the kids. Yeah. We haven't included them in the vision. So we've got to get that reconnected. And so having a constitution, or just an exercise where you all sit down as a family and, what do we stand for? What do we want to be remembered for? And those are the things in the legacies that last. And it's that legacy that's beyond wealth.
Yes.
That would have helped me the next time I'm done with surgery, but the next time I'm faced with that fine print, or anybody in the audience is faced with that kind of like aha moment of, are they prepared or are they provided for? If you've got a constitution, you're going to feel way more prepared. You're going to be able to check that box and say, yes, I'm confident that they are going to be able to run once I'm not leading, in whatever capacity that might look like.
I love that. Be prepared. Prepare the next generation. Don't just provide for them. Julia, this has been really, really great and informative. I think changing the perspective and the way we think about how we educate our kids about finance is such an important conversation, especially in the world of family businesses, but for every family. So thank you for bringing your passion to the world out of something that, could have been tragic in one instance, has become a beautiful new passion for you, which you're driving into the world. So thank you for doing that. And thank you for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for sharing. And it's just exciting when you really get aligned. And I just am looking forward to seeing that from you as well.
Thank you. And where can people find you if they want to get in touch, learn more about this family constitution or the generational wisdom? How can people get in touch?
I think the easiest thing is my name, Julia Myers, Myers. That's the East Coast spelling. So juliamyers.com is a great central place to get connected. I'm super active on LinkedIn. If you are over on LinkedIn, and I've got a great newsletter that I would love to send to your inbox. It's called Words of Wisdom, and we kind of unpack some of those pieces that lead to that just up-leveling your money mindset.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Julia. This was amazing. Please, everybody, go to juliamyers.com, spelled the East Coast way, which I just learned is a thing. That's great. And yes, follow her on LinkedIn. And thank you for listening to this episode. If you found value in this, or you think that anybody else can get value from how they're educating their kids about wealth, please share this episode with them. It helps get the word out and helps to help other family businesses to continue to thrive for generations. Thanks for joining us today. We will see you next time.